Welcome to the Scandinavian Mind podcast. I'm Conrad Olsen, founder and editor-in-chief of Scandinavian Mind. Today we are revisiting a talk from the Transformation Conference, a fashion tech event we hosted together with Uni Communication in Helsinki on May 31st, 2022. In the midst of the most transformative period that fashion has ever seen, we wanted to explore how Finland and Sweden could deepen their impact on the industry together. This panel talk was titled, How Brands Can Use Technology to Help with Sustainability. We listened to practical tips on how brands and designers can utilize new technologies and material sciences to accelerate their sustainability practices. Speakers were representatives from two leading innovation companies. Kirsi Terho is Key Account Director at Infinited Fiber Company, and Niklas von Weymarn is CEO at Metsä Spring. The Transformation Conference is a two-part event, and the second edition takes place in Stockholm on August 25 during Nordic Fabric Fair. If you want to get an invite to that event, please make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. I'd like to thank Helsinki partners for making this possible. Here now, my panel talk with Kirsi Terho and Niklas von Weymarn. Enjoy. I realized I have so many questions from you guys, and we're not going to reach the end of my long list because I'm a tech nerd. I like fashion, and I want to get into each of yours innovation. Kirsi, I will start with you. Perhaps for the audience who is not familiar with the Infinited Fiber Company and your product, which is called Infina, am I right?
Yes.
Give us the headlines on this.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Infinited Fiber.
You can get more.
What Infinited Fiber does, we take post-consumer textile waste out of the landfills, and what we do, we create a brand new fiber called Infina. We have a chemical recycling process where we are first, after collecting, sorting the materials and getting the cotton-rich material, removing colors, polyesters, elastane, everything that is in there, and we are interested in the cellulose. Then we go to carbamation, where we force the cellulose to connect with urea. Sounds terrible, but it's actually not. I will explain a little bit better. And then we make the cellulose dissolve into liquid. So we have cellulose liquid that we can then turn into brand new fiber by extruding it to the acid bath. And that's a totally reborn new fiber that is made out of 100% post-consumer textile waste. And the urea thing, that sounds terrible, but urea is an animal feed grade urea. You actually feed that to animals as well, so it's not that bad.
Thank you for that. You recently announced collaborations with Tommy Hilfiger brand, the entire PVC group, as well as Inditex, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I know you are responsible for these relationships with the fashion industry. Why is there such a great interest for these material companies? We had the same question before, but I want to hear it from you.
I think that every single brand is looking for solutions. They have made very big claims, and kind of like they are seeing the future that we will be using only recycled material. We will be fully circular by this and this year. So they need the solutions. And I think that most of the brands are shopping everywhere. But I think that those brands that have been doing their due diligence, they know who are the ones that really has a solution that can really provide to the circularity. And that's why they have been well after us.
And do they come to you, or do you go to them?
Both.
Both. Niklas, Metsä Spring. You have similar solution, but not quite. I'm going to ask you to describe your innovation as well, and we can get into some of these questions. But give us the rundown of what Metsä Spring is.
Yeah, happy to. I actually feel like the odd person in this room with a background of science and engineering and a PhD in technology. So I think I come from a fairly different direction, and I work for a forest industry company. So you know, in Finland, the UPM and Metsä Group, Stora Enso, going to Sweden, SCA and Södra and so on. So this is my base. And within the context of this Metsä Group especially, we have an innovation company, which is now almost on this day, actually on this day, 4 years old. We did file the papers a bit earlier, but it took 3 weeks for the local authority to get the company registered. And we are active in different projects, and this production of textile fiber from wood pulp is one of the projects, and obviously that's why I'm here. This is a garment made out of the kura fiber, as we call it.
So just to be clear, you are not a startup or sort of born out of nothing. You are born out of a bigger industrial company called Metsä here in Finland. Just to start with, what does that mean for your way of working?
Yeah, Metsä Group, the original company, was established in 1934, so we are not a startup anymore. Far from that, but a large company needs to try to innovate, and there are many ways to do that, but I think one way is to have a separate company or a separate unit that has the freedom to act like a startup. And we also invest in startup companies, so I think that is what makes our way of working a bit different. And then, of course, there is a huge difference depending on which side of the table you are sitting. Being a startup company, typically you are always looking for the next round of financing, and that kind of sets the tone of how you are working. Whereas in a large company, which is a profitable company, the financing is not the issue. It's then other issues that we have to work with, and so it makes the work different compared to what Infinited Fiber Company or Spinnova is doing.
But I'm curious, I mean, having this background, and you mentioned that you said you felt like a bit of an outsider here today, but we're so happy to have you. What are the incentives for Metsä going into this? Because it's not a natural evolution to become like a fashion company. That's not the driver here. Is it more about finding new business models for your core business?
Yeah, I think if you really simplify, we are really established in Finland, and the reason is that the parent company is a cooperative. So the cooperative in practice then have owner members, and they are all forest owners in Finland. So roughly today, 100,000 forest owners. So private people, might be some of you who are owner members of Metsä Liitto Cooperative. So the mission is quite clear. We are here to increase the value of the forest, the wood, owned by these owner members. And one way, or the way that Metsä Group can participate is by having a market for the wood. One of the main products we are producing today is pulp. So you convert wood into pulp, which is then used to make paper and within Metsä Group, paperboard and tissue paper and so on. We produce a huge amount of pulp, and about half of that is used inside Metsä Group, and the other half is sold to the market. So we have an opportunity to use that other half, at least part of that, and process that within Metsä Group to a new product. And then when we look for these new markets, one of the most interesting one is the textile market, because you obviously already have these food-based textile fibers on the market, although a small amount compared to polyester and cotton, but still 7 million tons per year, roughly. So it's a huge established market. The viscose process was invented over 100 years ago, so it's really an old industry. So we see that opportunity. We have this raw material, we have all the story, traceability, the foundation of the forest owners in our way of thinking, and now we are looking for new opportunities. And one of the main reasons is the fact that you cannot, the tree, wood is a limited resource. And in countries like Finland and Sweden, we are already using close to the limit of how much you should take out of the forest on an annual basis. So And that is debated all the time, which is the limit, but in both Finland and Sweden, the forest grows more on an annual basis than what is taken away. That's important. So it's a truly renewable raw material. But how much? Is it 80 or 90 or 70% which you can take out of the annual growth? That's debatable, and that's, of course, important to continue. So a company like Metsä Group, long answer, but it's very important to understand. We cannot continue to grow on a model where we use more wood. So we need to also look further down the value chain, how we can make valorize more or take part further down in the value chain and grow there.
And just to be clear, it's viscose and lyocell. That's two of the products you're hoping to kind of replace or make an alternative to.
Yeah, there are essentially 4 different technologies today on the market, excluding now these young Finnish companies and Swedish companies. So viscose being the biggest, I think then cellulose acetate or lyocell being number 2, and then one factory making cupro. And what we are doing, we are trying to develop a method where you directly dissolve the cellulose. So it's a direct dissolution technology, which is the same as we know the lyocell process today. So I would say that at least in the beginning, if we go into this business, we would be selling to the same customers who buy lyocell today.
Right.
I would add there, like viscose industry is really heading to this end. Because what I have been hearing, for example, from China, is that viscose mills are being closed because of the nerve poisons that they are using. And that is probably the place where you have a big role.
Yeah, and Infinited Fiber company as well. But that's true. The viscose process, it creates toxic chemicals, so that's bad for the workers within the factory, but also for the environment outside. And to build that kind of factory in Europe would not happen anymore. It would be too expensive to try to protect that the workers and the environment. So my guess is that we will never see a new viscose factory in Europe or Western world. I don't know about China and Asia, but the Western world. And I think the fashion brands also start to realize that you need to slowly move away from this current viscose material.
Kirsi, let's talk about recycling. And I think this is one of the topics I find really fascinating. I think there needs to be a lot of innovation in the sourcing of the recycled material as well. How do you tackle this problem? How do you see the future for fashion recycling?
Let's start with the kind of like how do you should design. So first of all, let's design for the circularity, because if that is thought already on that table, that's much more easier. But currently, there is so many blends, so many different fabrics. They have trims, they have everything in the clothes. And there is toxic chemicals in the clothes. And for example, the sorting of the materials is done by hand still, mainly. There is emerging technologies really helping that to really get to the level where we can identify fast what are the materials that are in there. I think that the kind of like recycling technologies itself, there is emerging technologies for polyester, for example, is not there yet. Cotton is kind of like the most recycled material. But then there is a lot of others that doesn't have any solution. So there is a lot to do in that area still. But I think that if we think about how the whole recycling or circularity should be done, someone is saying it's a chicken and egg problem. It's not. Well, let's just burn the whole industry at large at the same time. It really needs to be evolved to the level that the whole ecosystem is ready for it. And then we just press yes and go for it.
Yeah. Niklas.
Yeah, Konrad, if you allow me to comment, if I give an example, and this is not bragging, but all of us, we are recycling paper and cardboard at the home and also office and so on. And in Europe, if you measure how much of this kind of material is recycled, it's roughly 75% already. And if you go now to textile recycling, it's like 1%. So it's really kindergarten compared to what other industries have already developed. And what Kirsi is saying, it's not one company, it's really the whole system that has to be the mindset has to be changed for that to work.
Well, it's kind of obvious that, you know, in the recycling rooms of our apartment buildings and so forth, we don't have the bins for cotton or polyester and so forth. And maybe it would be impossible for the general consumer to do that today. But I guess that's where we need to be headed, right?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. But if you think about kind of like having different bins for the cotton and the polyester, then what do you do with the plant? 50-50 plant with cotton and polyester, which bin?
Right.
So I think that it's to kind of like have the collection that is legislated in EU very soon. Kind of like just throw everything in the same bin and somebody else is doing the sorting. So have the hubs that are doing it in the different areas of the EU, for example.
So let's talk about, do you know more about this legislation than I do? And I know Finland is maybe taking a more aggressive steps than the rest of the Europe, but what is it to 2025 that we need to recycle our textiles? Do you know?
It needs to be collected.
It needs to be collected?
Yes. And Finland is taking a little bit of front runner in that, and we are kicking in next year.
Next year?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Go Finland.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Kirsi said. The issue of what bin to use, it really starts from the design of the clothing. So you really need to rethink how you are designing also for reuse. And that is not done, you know, in fast fashion or fashion today. And that needs to change. That's all have been done in the paper and the cardboard business. That's been developed for the purpose of recycling. Regarding the regulation thing, something that you need to follow is this new textile strategy. That's of course only a framework. It's not legislation, but it lists a lot of new regulation that they are proposing to come in the upcoming years. And there's a lot of things that would come and change our industry, or the textile industry, fashion industry at large. So I don't think we have time to go into the details, but it also includes this design for durability and recycling. It puts much more pressure and responsibility on the producers. You should really show how much of your annual production is not sold. There's a lot of clothing that's never sold, and that's, you know, thrown away or burnt somewhere. In worst case, you find it in Chile, in the desert. So,
that's horrible.
So those companies, the producers, they will have the responsibility, if this legislation goes through, to really show these numbers. And obviously that would then reduce that kind of taking place.
We're going to have a session on the new EU regulations at the Stockholm edition of this conference in August. But it's my understanding that a lot of the fashion industry, in terms of the fashion brands, are pretty unaware of these new regulations coming. And Niklas, you mentioned this. It's quite complex. It's not very easy to understand. Both of you, do you feel like you understand what's going to happen in terms of legislation? How that will impact the fashion industry? You're laughing.
Does anybody understand EU? That's my question. I think it is a very large document. There's a lot of things that they are trying to solve in there. And I think that kind of like a producer liability is one of the big things that is in there. And I think that will surprise a lot of friends in the end.
I think it's a larger issue. We just had a senior management meeting last week within Metsä Group, and I think the CEO president used the term tsunami, and he refers to our current business. There's so much new legislation coming from this current commission that you hardly have time to understand what that means. And even the local ministries are saying the same. It's too much coming up at the moment. And one of the, obviously this commission is really ambitious regarding this Green Deal and stuff like that. But one of the problems in how this is set up is the different departments, DGs. And they are quite independent, these DGs, departments in the commission. And they all produce their own legislation. So you have the industry DG producing industry-friendly regulation, and then you have this environmental DG producing, obviously, something for the better ecological sustainability. And they are not aligned. So this department is saying that push for this, and this one is kill that. So it still becomes legislation, and we have to live with that. So it's really difficult.
Yeah, and sometimes even there isn't enough kind of like a knowledge about making the decisions. So that, for example, was the single-use plastic regulation that they were doing earlier, and they were there claiming that, for example, all the cellulosic fibers are plastic, which was craziness because it comes from the woods, it comes from the earth, it comes from something that is fully biodegradable. So I think that the knowledge base needs to be there and it needs to be followed very thoroughly.
Yeah, that was generated too fast. They did not really make the good impact assessments and understand the science, and still we are implementing it now at the moment in each member state in the EU. And funny thing is, each member state is doing it differently. Italy is really allowing almost anything, and then you have France banning almost anything.
I feel like EU it's a rabbit hole we can speak to the whole day. But
and we need beer for that.
Fashion industry, beware! There's a tsunami coming from EU. Let's end with a little bit about both your organizations, where you're standing right now. Kirsi, maybe you can start in terms of what you're doing. Are there factories coming? How do you see you want to scale your business? Is it you want to produce it on your own, or is it another business model on the horizon?
Yeah, so Infinite Fiber Company is now in the stage of scale up. And we are currently ready to build up our factory ourselves with a 30,000 tons per annum capacity. It's a commercial scale factory, but it's still in let's say, a small scale. And for that, we have been selling the fibers out already. And we are not allowed to tell what is the place where the factory is going to be built, but it's going to be in Finland. And that's kind of like a scope.
Whisper to me. This mic.
This mic, yeah. And then, of course, after that, 30,000 tons is a fraction of what is needed. And there's a huge demand. And so after that, we kick in our licensing path. Of course, the licensing model is already created. There is a package ready for the concept ready for the factories, and that is being then the next step to really expand rapidly to, for example, Asia.
Niklas, where do you stand?
Yeah, as mentioned, Metsä Spring is an innovation company. We have many projects, but in terms of this textile fiber project, we have what we call a demonstration plant. So we have not decided yet to go to business. We are still testing the technology, and we are still testing the market. The latter part is a collaboration with a Japanese company called Itochu. So they get the fiber, and then they go to the customers and see what they think about it. So this demonstration plant, just to give you some scope, we have invested roughly 45 million euros into that, and it's still not business. It's a non-profitable, huge plant, and that's a typical challenge for companies like us. We need to invest quite a lot of money into the asset. So not all the investors are interested in that kind of business models. We hope to overcome the challenges and have green flags in all the questions, market, technology, patents, and so on, and then move to business. And if we do that, the factory would be in Finland. The factories would be in Finland. Our concept is based on integrating to our pulp mills, so utilizing the benefit of being part of a much larger industrial asset. So that's what we are going for. And this is actually a nice garment made by Itochu's partner, the Re-Racks.
Let's end on that note, because we've talked before about the consumer and the sort of challenge of bringing data, new technologies, explaining this to the consumer. Both of you, where do you see your role in creating strong brand narratives, and where do you see your role in the fashion ecosystem there, Kirsi?
I would say that we do that through our brand partners. So we educate them. We encourage them to talk to the consumers, really kind of like supporting them in their marketing communications, really kind of like helping them to help the consumer to understand what is available. I think that is our role. Of course, ourselves, we are still a very small company. We don't have a big voice. and to have companies like Zara or H&M or those guys, which are huge, to talk about this. I think that that is the way forward. Of course, I have been hearing a lot of fast fashion and greenwashing words today. There is a lot of talk about that. But at the same time, what it needs to be understood when we are claiming someone is doing greenwashing is that the solutions are not in scale yet.
No.
So if they are producing, for example, 100 garments made out of Infina, it doesn't mean that they are just trying to get their name out and kind of like a claim that they are sustainable because they're using it. It's more or less that they want to talk about us, they want to educate, and also at the same time, they don't have an availability of the fibers, so they don't have an opportunity to even make the big launches. Of course, there's greenwashing. I'm not claiming that there isn't, but I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding in that area also.
It's an interesting point, and it is hard to scale some of these more sustainable practices because of the supply. Niklas, quickly before we end, how do you see your role in communication? And I know you're doing some collaborations with Japan and so forth, but...
Yeah, that's our main strategy at the moment. Although Metsä Group is a large company, 6 billion euros per annum, we know nothing about the textile market. We know more now, but in 2014, when I went to Tokyo to ask Itochu to partner up, we didn't know anything. So at the moment, we are working with Itochu. Itochu works with the customers, the brands, and gives us feedback, and we focus on the technology, which is the demonstration plant in Äänekoski, Finland. But we have also already now created a brand, Kura. And if you want to follow the project, go to kura.io, so you will see what is going on. And that was partly, although not in business yet, it takes time to build a brand, but also for Itochu to have a storyline to go back to, because it's not so easy to explain, the Finnish forest and the cooperative structure and the fact that these forest owners, they actually want us to make the textile fiber. It's not the situation where what you hear about where companies come and steal the tree, the wood from the forest nearby. In this case, it's really people who are managing the forest so that they can sell the wood and make, for instance, Kura textile fiber. So they are very proud, and even in on the Kura.io page, I think we have 4 real forest owners explaining why they are part of this and how they are proud about this. So that's our stake.
Exciting stuff. Niklas von Weymarn and Kirsi Terho, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. That was an outtake from the Transformation Conference in Helsinki in May of 2022. The Transformation Conference is a 2-part event, and the second edition takes place in Stockholm on August 25, 2022 during Nordic Fabric Fair. If you want to get an invite to that event, please make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. Until next time, goodbye.